Hi, this is Frank Marino of Mahogany Rush, and you're listening to Prophet's Corner.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Prophet's Corner, part 3 of the series for this gentleman. I'm stoked to bring him back on again, and I'm stoked to talk to him. You know, of course, who I'm talking about is Mr. Matt Harvey. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm well. How are you? It's been a couple weeks.
I'm busy.
Yeah, I feel that, man. I'm right there with you, dude.
So 12 interviews in 15 days. So I'm a little bit busy, but
Woo!
it's
Damn, that's
kicking
nuts, man.
kicking some ass for the scene here. So
That
you,
rules, dude.
you know how we do. But yeah, you know how the show works. So let's get started, man. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Fuck yeah. So last time we left off, you coming back from Hawaii, and we're gonna start there. So when you came back initially, how much time passed before that to essentially filling in for Grayfield and then joining them after, or I mean,
I was kind of planning to come back, and talking. I think I had just joined Facebook recently. That was like, I was hearing about it like, oh, this is the new MySpace or whatever. And so I was just chatting with, some old friends and stuff. And you were kind of mapping out some stuff for Exhumed. I think we had like a couple festivals in Europe and Maryland, but that was all in 2011. And so, but it was being mapped out in 2010. And I was talking with Rhett, who I've known since the early 90s when Exhumed and Morgion played together back when I was in high school. And, he was like, well, when are you coming back? And this and that, because he was talking about this tour and they needed a new guitar player because of some drama that I can't remember the specifics of with the old guy in his little red outfit. I want to say his name was Adam. I don't know. I was in Hawaii at the time. So no disrespect to him or his playing or anything. I just was kind of learning about everything as it went. And he said they had this tour coming up and would I like to fill in? And I thought, well, I haven't gone anywhere in the continental U.S. really, like in a few years. There's a lot of people I haven't seen. And this would be a fun thing to do because I was moving back. I was moving to my dad's house here in San Luis Obispo County. This was, the recession was still very recessing at that time. And I was living in Hawaii. So I was like broke, like, like $33 in my checking account broke.
right.
And so it wasn't like I had a job or anything that I was coming to California for. I was just like, I was just going to move back in with my dad and, kind of do whatever until the band stuff started and then just sort of see what happened. And I thought, well, this is cool. Then I won't have to get a job as soon. I could just sort of come and have fun and chill with some friends and stuff. And that was what led me to do the U.S. tour with Gravehill.
Interesting. Now, let's go back. So how do you move? How does anybody move from Hawaii to the States, like with all the furniture and whatnot?
Oh, I didn't bring any of that shit with me either direction. I mean, before I left California, I put the vast majority of my stuff in storage. And I brought I had a computer, I had one guitar, and I had a suitcase of clothes, basically.
Okay.
I lived there for almost between a year and a half and 2 years. But I mean, because there's such a high turnover of people moving to the island and then back to the mainland, there's a lot of places that are semi-furnished or there's, pretty easy to get cheap furniture. And you don't need a lot of clothing when you live on Maui. Like you got one pair of jeans, 2 pairs of swim trunks, 3 pairs of shorts, a few shirts and a light jacket and maybe a hoodie,
Right.
And at the time I was growing my hair back outside a hat. And that was really it, I really didn't, I packed very light and had all my stuff in storage. I didn't think I was going to live there forever unless something really crazy happened. And in that case, if it was going so great, I could have brought my stuff over for the mainland. But I realized when I moved there that that was unlikely. So
Right.
I came back, got all my stuff out of storage at my dad's, and then luckily my dad had an extra car, so it was like I had a car right away because I sold my car before I left California, and I didn't. I think I had my ex-girlfriend's car on Maui. Anyway, so yeah, I was coming home pretty much. Just had my stuff out of storage. Had like one Marshall cab and like 2 guitars, and that was it. Like, and just my personal belongings, you know.
And then an opportunity with Grateful to tour the States and whatnot. What do you know if it was a tour by you guys selves, or was it with another band, or
it was with Hod and Cardiac Arrest?
Okay.
And I've been friends with those guys ever since. Like, I still talk to Tom and Adam from Cardiac semi-regularly. TA, who was in Hod at the time, I remained friends with forever. Now he's in Grave Hill. Or not Grave Hill, Goat Horse, sorry. Different G band, 2 words combined, Goat Horse.
Right.
And so that was really cool. And obviously I still know, you know, Rhett and Mikey and
of course,
Bob and all those guys. And later, you know, Christian and everybody that came later as well. So
totally. So after the tour, what made you decide to just stick around and record, you know, when all roads lead to hell record, you know? To
HE double hockey sticks.
That's right.
Well, you know, it was fun. And that was really the bottom line. Is I had a lot of fun hanging out with everybody, especially Bob and Mikey. And the way that they write is very like jam room oriented. So I would be down there practicing the songs with them, and then they would be going through stuff that they were working on. And I mean, what am I going to do? Just sit in the corner and, you know, read a book or whatever. And so I just started learning the newer songs. And then, you know, of course, me being myself, I'm like, well, that's stupid. You guys should do a part that goes like this and blah, 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 blah. And then pretty soon I was like, well, I guess I'm in the band. But it was, you know, always with the understanding that we didn't really know what was going to happen with Exhumed, but it was with the understanding that that would be my main priority. And, you know, if things really got moving with the record that we were about to do, then I would have to focus on that. But, you know, they're very accommodating. And like I said, we've all been friends forever. So, you know, at least Rhett and Mikey and myself. So it was pretty smooth, you know, and it was fun jamming with those guys also because it was less pressure for me in a way because obviously with Exhumed I'm the lead singer and the main songwriter and the you know the person people associate with the band, whereas with Grave Hill it was just like, I don't know, these guys are doing a thing and I'm just like, if I got a couple riffs here and there or an idea like that, that's great. If they don't like it, like, that's fine too, you know.
Well, I know they had always told me that Matt is a fucking riff machine. Like, that guy doesn't stop writing killer riffs. So, you know, but just going into recording the record, how was it a different, you know, what was the process? How was it different than, say, recording, say, an Exhumed record or anything you had done previous to Grave Hill? Because the songs are a much simplistic kind of style of death metal.
Right. It was kind of like in between like the early Exhumed records and the later Exhumed records. It wasn't as unprofessional as like, you know, gore metal or whatever, but there were no metronomes or any of that kind of stuff. It was just like, you know, like I said, their whole process was always very jam oriented. And because Rhett is sort of the band leader and kind of the principal songwriter, although maybe not in the BMI ASCAP definition of that, but he's sort of the director of things. And because he doesn't actually play guitar, it'd be really convenient if he did. But, but because he doesn't actually play guitar, he's got to be in the room working through the material with everybody and be like, we need a part that's like this, or like, we need a, you know, Bathory riff, or we need a Slayer riff, or Celtic Frost riff, or whatever. And, you know, kind of just throwing out these arrangement ideas, and everyone's sort of kind of playing off him. You know, he's the driving force. And so because of that, the songs are developed in a jam oriented fashion, and the recording was more like that too. Like, we just did 2 tracks, and I can't remember, you know, because most of the Exhumed stuff, at least everything from Anatomy is Destiny on, is all It's always 4 guitars recorded. And I can't remember if Rob played one rhythm track and I played the other on every song, or if we played certain songs, I did both, and then he did both. I really can't remember. But it was a little, it wasn't like, I don't want to make it sound slipshod because it wasn't, but it was a little bit more casual and like underground or whatever than like what we would do on subsequent Exhumed records and stuff.
So was there less pressure, which made it more fun? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, every record, I shouldn't say every record, but it's usually fun to some extent, but for me, it was very low pressure. I mean, I knew the songs, and that was the main thing, and they weren't looking for somebody that every single 16th note is going to be perfectly audible or whatever. It wasn't the approach of the band. It was pretty raw. It wasn't shitty, but it was raw. And so I felt confident that what I was going to bring to the table was going to be up to scratch. And we rehearsed pretty frequently, I was driving down to Orange County, at least once a month, and I'd stay there for like an extended weekend or whatever. And, so everybody was pretty prepared, and the band moves at a much slower pace than, like most of my other bands, where it's either we're constantly going or we're not doing anything, and then we're doing everything in a very condensed amount of time,
Interesting. Now, I like the fact. I mean, this record was recorded, I believe, at with John Haddad, right, at Trench, and subsequently you've been going there almost ever since, at least for the drums, if I'm not mistaken. Right. But just working with him, was that your first time working with him?
It was, but I don't know if I knew John, but we were very 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. And, he had played in a couple bands. And I was like, oh, you were in, I think he was in Dead America. He was in another band from the late 90s
I can't remember.
Whose name escapes me, but they were on Century Media for a second kind of thing. And so it was like, it was very, he was kind of like between like the more like punk and metal realms of the Orange County scene. And certainly in the 90s, especially in the early 90s, the Orange County scene was like the most active and kind of professional in the underground in California. That's where you had Phobia, you had Morgion, you had Mind Rot, and, playing in the Bay Area, it was just kind of us and Immortal Fate. And, we all felt like the bands from Orange County were a little bit more ahead of us, and then there came like Carcinogen, and then the Mike Nelson obviously was in Gasp. And so he was sort of straddling both the punk and metal thing as well. And so it was just really natural to work with Haddad. But the main issue I had with working with John was that John doesn't like guitar solos. So you'd be tracking a solo and you're like, well, what do you think? And he's like, I don't care. I'm a fucking punk rocker, man. Whatever. Do you want to do it again? If you made a really obvious fuck up, he would be like, yeah, you fucked up. But he just didn't care. But he did a great job on the drums because he's a drummer and he's got a great live room. And that was what brought us back to do the next 2 Exhumed records with John,
Interesting. Okay. Now, when you're approaching the recording process, you said you did like a rhythm track or maybe a rhythm track per song and then a couple solos and whatnot. Then the record comes out, and I'm kind of curious what the initial reaction is, with because this is your first outing back into the community, so to speak. And I'm just kind of curious what the reaction is from all of your friends and peers and whatnot.
I think the record did, it seemed like it was pretty positively received. I don't think that it was necessarily a big deal that I was on it, because at the time Gravehill was quite busy on their own. I think that was more of like a side note. It wasn't like, ooh, that dude. The record was about Gravehill and what they were already doing and the momentum that they had already built. And, if hopefully if a couple more people checked it out because I was on the record, that's cool too. But it wasn't my show, But I remember the record getting pretty good reviews and I was pretty happy with it. you know, I wrote the last song on the record, and that was fun. You know, just kind of like throwing some autopsy kind of riffs in there or whatever. And yeah, actually, I wrote another song for the record that became Sickened on Necrocracy. I had written it originally for Decapitator.
Okay.
And I sort of tweaked it and brought it to Grave Hill. We learned it, and everybody was like, "Oh, this song's cool." And then we kind of came back, and Rhett kind of made the executive decision that it didn't really fit. And I was like, "Why?" And it was like, I don't know. But at any rate, I thought it was a good song. And so then when we were writing for Necrocracy, I was like, well, I have this song that I've already sort of started over here. I kind of tweaked it over there. All I got to do is just tweak it a little bit more, and then we're good to go. You know, so that was one in the bag kind of thing.
Absolutely. And after the whole Grateful experience, what is the next step in the Harvey camp? Because Exhumed you had gotten the guys back together in Exhumed and brought back some members that you had played in a couple of years now.
Right.
So just walk me through just where you were at this specific moment, and why make the decision to bring back Exhumed at that moment as well.
I think, you know, I'd got enough distance to where I could look at what had happened as I could see the glass as half full, you know, and it was at least half full really in hindsight, but I had the perspective to look at it the right way and sort of, you know, and also there was a frustration with how things sort of fizzled at the end, or at the end. And, you know, I always knew that I wanted to make that right at some point. And, you know, I felt like we had the songs, and I felt like maybe we'd had enough time away to where people would be a little bit more interested in what we were doing. You know, we're just sort of kind of bratty, I guess, of like, oh, you'll miss me when I'm gone. But I think, you know, for whatever reason, enough people did, and that worked out quite well for us as a business strategy. And, you know, I felt like the record was going to be good because obviously Danny Walker is like a premier level drummer, like top level guy. And, you know, I felt like the songs were good. You know, Wes and I were running a lot of good riffs. But at the same time, I was just kind of like, well, let's do the record and sort of see what happens. We had a few gigs lined up, and we're just going to kind of, you know, if it has legs, then we'll run with it. And if it doesn't, then we'll just do these festivals, and then I'll find some sort of job, and I'll sort of figure out whatever my next thing is going to be. And then, you know, whatever, we can do a record now and again and play a couple festivals, and that'll be fine too. And that's something cool. And then the record obviously ended up having legs, and I think we were on tour for that record for like 2 years straight.
Yeah, it was a long tour. It was a long tour process, I remember.
Yeah, like we just never really stopped. We kept getting offers, and I guess I'm jumping ahead, but I remember at one point we'd been on tour for like a year and a half, and I was talking with our agent at the time, Dan Rosenblum, and I was like, well, I think we're good, but there's 2 bands on your roster that we really would like to tour with. And he's like, oh, really? Because I was going to ask you something. So who are those bands? And I was like, well, what are you going to ask me? He's like, tell me who the bands are. And I was like, well, like Napalm Death, for obvious reasons, and Municipal Waste. And he just started laughing, and he's like, yeah, because they're touring together. And I was going to picture that tour. Like, do you guys want it? I was like, all right, I guess we're doing one more tour.
Right.
And then,
was that was the tour that Repulsion played as well at the Galaxy, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a lot of like special guests on the West Coast. We had Wehrmacht in Portland, and we had Attitude Adjustment
in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah, and we had Repulsion in Orange County, which was great for me because I'm a big fan of all those bands. And, you know, for me, it was always about going fast, and these are the bands that were going super fast before super fast was really a thing. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to tour with Waste, is because I know those guys come from the same sort of sensibility of like, doesn't really matter if it's punk or if it's metal. It's like, is it fast? Is it intense? And that was really my motivating thing, you know? So.
And going back to, how much did social media play into you Exhumed getting back together again?
It didn't really play much into us getting back together. It really didn't start affecting things, I think, until we were going. Because in terms of just talking to the guys, like it just started with like texting, you know. This was back when that was just the thing, I guess. I mean, there was like AIM or whatever, which I never got into, but it just started really with texting. And you know, I know for Wes, you know, I don't think he's my biggest fan, so I don't want to try and put too many words in his mouth, but I know he was frustrated because he sort of joined the band at the very end and he was hoping he was going to do more. And, you know, so this, I think, was a way to sort of address that for him. And then, you know, for Danny and Leon, it was just more of a fun thing because as much as they both, you know, were kind of aiming to become more like serious musician types at the time, I know they both had a lot of fun on the Exhumed tours. And I remember that, you know, both of them were saying like, yeah, when we get together and like have a few beers, like all we do is talk about the stupid shit that happened on tour with Exhumed. Like we're like, think we're going to talk about Intronaut or whatever. And it's like, oh, okay. And so, you know, everybody knew it was going to be a kind of a fun thing. And obviously Leon, we knew wasn't going to stick around for the long haul. Danny, same thing, but it was just like, well, we have, you know, we have a good lineup that everybody likes each other, everyone knows each other, and we can do a record together. And then whatever happens afterwards, we'll figure it out afterwards.
And you guys ended up doing it pretty much in the same year as the Gravehole record, with All Guts, No
Right.
Glory. And typically for an Exhumed record, I'm assuming you got, you know, you're not really a jam sort of band. I'm assuming you guys write kind of at your guys' respective pads, come together,
Right.
put a range of songs, and then go into the studio. So, you know, how difficult of a transition was that for you compared to, say, I don't know, getting somewhat used to doing what Gravehill did for All Roads Lead to Hell?
Well, I like both approaches. You know what I mean? I really have fun just jamming. Like it's great. And I think if it was practical and everybody lived in the same town, I'd love to be a band that rehearses 3 times a week. And we would shift our writing style to that, but we're not, and nobody fucking lives anywhere near each other. So it's like, if we wait until we get together, you know, we'll never write another song. So really it's just a matter of necessity, but you know, it was a pretty easy adjustment. And the good thing was that like Wes and I practiced a lot together. You know, I would sometimes on my way down to Orange County, he was living in, I think, Camarillo at the time or somewhere in Ventura County. And I would stop by his house and we would just like get like an 18-pack and sit and just go through riffs and riffs and riffs. And then I would drive to Orange County, or I would be coming back north from Orange County and the same thing. So he and I practiced quite a bit together. And Danny is one of those drummers. He's just very well prepared. He doesn't come in until he's ready.
Needed? Yeah.
Well, you know, and I think it's just more of like a personal, that's his approach. He doesn't want to come in and do stuff on the fly. He wants to be in control of the situation from the beginning. He's a lot like Gus from Gruesome in that respect. Gus, like he wants to have it 100% in his own corner before he feels comfortable playing with the rest of the band. Whereas I'm like, I don't know, I'll just show up and see what happens. So Danny just came in and he was like, okay, cool, I'm ready. It was like, all right. It just came down to like, can we play fast enough to keep up with what he was doing? And then Leon was sort of in the middle, like he was kind of prepared, but you know, we had enough time in the studio to where it didn't really matter, you know.
And you chose the guys that you chose just because of your previous friendships and whatnot. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah. Well, the main thing was that in choosing those guys rather than, you know, Cole or Mike Beams or whatever, number one, I knew Cole didn't want to be in a professional type band. But the main thing was I wanted it to be a continuation of where the band left off. And that was much more where we left off rather than like a nostalgia thing, you know, or you know, because we were only broken up for like 5 years and it was not like we weren't Kiss, you know. It's like people aren't going to be mad. That's not the fucking right cat dude or whatever. So that was my thing. I was like, this isn't like a reunion. This is just like, okay, we went and we got to there and then we stopped and now we're going to pick up there and then move forward kind of thing. And that was really that was the main driving factor behind the choice of sort of who was in the band. You know?
Do you think if you went with the nostalgic route, maybe your career trajectory wouldn't have taken off as fast as it did?
I just think, you know, it's tough to say. At that point, like having been gone for a while, I was really surprised at the sort of goodwill that we'd built up in the scene, and like that people missed the band, you know? So I think it could have done well. I think it might have been maybe a little bit better business decision in the short term, but in the long run, it would have been very limiting because we would have had to build a new lineup anyway, you know? And it wasn't about, you know, taking anything away from the guys that played on the first 3 records. It just was about knowing that they had all already moved on before we split up anyway. So I'm picking up where I left off. I'm not trying to go back to the beginning and turn it into something else, you know?
Right. Well, and some of the members ended up coming back not too much after this era too, you know? So obviously All Guts, No Glory was a kind of a massive record in a resurgence for Exhumed, as you discussed a little bit earlier. And then I think Bud comes into the fold to do the remainder of the tour.
Yeah. You know, basically, Wes, you know, it was just more of like a personality conflict thing. You know, the more we toured, the worse we started getting along, and it just, you know, just started kind of wearing everybody down. And, you know, Wes wrote a lot of the songs on All Guts. He sort of insisted, like, if I wrote 6 songs, he was like, I got to write 6 songs. Like, he was I was like, well, there's no rule. I mean, I'm stoked that you're coming up with stuff. It's great. But it doesn't, you know, he was very like assertive in that domain. And he just, so I really wanted to preserve the working relationship if it could be preserved, because I liked what he came up with. You know, like he wrote like I Rot Within and Death Knell and I forget all the other songs on the record, but you know, he wrote some of the songs that we were playing live every night. And but it just turned kind of bitter with him. And you know, Danny had left. We knew from the beginning, and Mike Hamilton had joined. Mike's very level-headed, and then Leon had left, which again we knew from the onset. And then Rob, whatever you want to call him, from Grave Hill. You know, we'd become really good friends, and I liked playing with him, so I just sort of brought him over to Exhumed, albeit on bass. And Rob and Wes especially did not get along, and it just became a thing where I was sort of putting everybody in the band through this kind of tension, just to preserve working with this one guy. And it was like, well, and in the end of the day, I don't want to stop being on tour all the time. These guys don't want to stop being on tour all the time. There's one person that's sort of making it unbearable. And you know, no disrespect to him as a guitar player for sure, man, and especially as a riff writer, but it just was not working out.
Well, and your decision to bring back Bud, out of all the guitar players, did you guys reconvene? Because that guy literally lives off the grid, from my understanding, right? Like, I don't even think he has a cell phone. I think he's got
he does
landline. Okay,
he does now, but well, you know, Bud was he was the best guitarist I knew. B, I'd done tons of tours with him, and you know, I played with him in Scarecrow after Exhumed. So there was no like bad blood or anything whatsoever. I always got along great with Bud. And I knew he was just very low maintenance, super chill. And I thought it would be cool, rather than finding somebody new, to sort of have an element of continuity. And, you know, while it was great that Wes was writing a lot of songs, I wasn't in the position where I was dying to get a songwriting partner. It was like, I got plenty of riffs. It's fine. And so bringing Bud in, you know, just made sense from a lot of different angles, and it was really easy. It was a very painless transition. It was literally like I was out doing Death to All, and Wes called me, and we got in an argument, and I was like, fuck this guy. Like, that was my last straw. Right. And I got home, and I met with Mike or Hamilton, and I was like, so I'm firing Wes, and he was like, okay, that's a relief. I knew that was coming. I was like, all right, cool. And then I was like, I think we're going to get this dude Bud. And, nobody knew him outside of myself. And it was just like, boom. The chemistry was there because Bud and I played together.
Right.
He's a great guitar player. It was just like, all right, that was like, we just kept going like totally seamlessly.
But he played bass with you on an Anonymity is Destiny, right? He did play bass on it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. He played bass with the whole time he was in Exhumed before, which was stupid because he's a great guitar player. But I just was like, well, I'm the guitar player and I'm not going to step aside because of my ego. And anyway, so.
But he has this talent, as I'll say, with he can literally puke on command.
Right.
That was kind of like, I don't know, like a thing with Exhumed, in the Exhumed annals. Oh, there's a guy that can puke on command, and he does it every fucking show. So literally, you would see. I think I've seen old videos where there's literally trash bags, and you don't want to be in the first couple rows or whatever of seeing Exhumed back in the day, because literally there was a point in the show as a theatrics or whatever where he would vomit on command. He's like schizo, and so knowing that and bringing him back, was there a decision to say, hey, I just need you to play guitar? No puking, no nothing.
I mean, I love the vomiting gag. To me, like nothing's more death metal than vomiting. Like, I think it's great. However, even towards the end when he was in the band previously, we were like, you don't have to do this, dude, because the back of his teeth, that area I was just pointing to, were disgusting. And I was like, there's no Exhumed dental plan, man. Like, we just don't. That does not exist. So if you want to, if you're dying to do it, okay, that's great. No one's asking you to. There's no pressure. It's fine. Like we're developing something with Dr. Filthy, and we're not going to have to sort of do that stuff anymore. And he would do it occasionally, like if we were playing like a bigger show, he would be like, "Oh, maybe I think I'm going to puke tonight." All right, if you want, great. And we knew how to deal with it with the trash bags and such. But yeah, it was really just more about letting him play guitar. Poor guy. He's an amazing guitar player. And we're like, can you just vomit?
Well, dude, I mean, that was like a thing. Like, who does that?
It was a great thing, but it was for his health. And honestly, if you're puking up a lot of acid, it's going to eat away at your throat eventually. It's just not good for you to vomit every day.
Right, and it's like 10 years after this too.
Right.
It's not like it's a year or two.
Exactly.
It's hey, come back in the band and we want you to puke. It's like we want you for your talent. And in saying that, watching you guys on this particular cycle, as I'll call it, which we'll get to the album Necrocracy in a minute, but watching you guys on this tour cycle, I'm like, man, I knew Bob could sing the growls. He was handling all the lows, which Exhumed desperately needs, right? You have like that dynamic with the in between two styles of singing, right?
Right.
But I noticed, I'm like, man, Bud's actually a really good guitar player, because I was like, he was great on bass, but I didn't know he could play guitar until that specific cycle. So, and it's I just thought he killed it on that specific thing. I still wish he was in the project, because I just love his guitar playing now. And
he is amazing.
And the dynamic between you guys, though, was the key too. I always thought you and him had this like guitar duo finally.
Yeah, it was like a Hetfield Hammett thing, that we had going on. And the thing about Bud is that, again, no, not to disrespect or shit on anybody else that's been in the band, but he's a great guitar player. He's technically a great guitar player, like mechanically. He's got a very deep knowledge of theory. And he's got a lot of confidence. Like he never cared about his monitor mix. He didn't care about his tone. Like I literally would just dial in his amp tone for him. I was like, "You like that?" He's like, "It's cool." I was like, "Okay." And a lot of the solos that he did on Necrocracy were just like first take stuff. And some of it was like he heard the song for the first time, because we didn't have a lot of great pre-production back then. We had some songs pre-prod. And other times he'd be like, I was like, so this is in key X. He'd be like, all right, cool. He listen, and he'd be like, just show me that riff. All right. And then he would just sit down and was like, all right, well, cool. That take's done. And so it was really just another level working with, somebody that is like a virtuoso guitar player. And and that's why I had just such confidence in him, because I remember even with Scarecrow, I think I was like, we were jamming with Damien and Will and myself for like a couple weeks. And then we had our first show very quickly, and they hadn't even met Bud yet. And they're like, dude, who is this guy? Like, what the fuck? And he came for one rehearsal, and he was only there for like an hour because he had to go. Like, he was like, didn't get the night off work or something. And he just came in. It was like, oh, hey, nice to meet you guys. Cool, run on. Sorry, yeah, just my work schedule's crazy. Plugged in, played the whole set perfectly, and like, he started soloing, and Will and Damien looked at him and looked at each other like, what the fuck? And then he's like, all right, it's cool. Sorry, I got to go. I'll see you guys at the show in 2 days. And they're like, yeah, okay, he's fine. And so I just, I had all the confidence that he would just be able to show up and just, get it done.
Absolutely. Dude, and I think this is probably my favorite Exhumed record, minus Anonymity is Destiny.
Cool.
For me, just in terms of guitar tone, I really felt like, especially guitar-wise, there was a more cohesive unit on this record for me than, say, All Guts, No Glory, No Disrespect. I just felt like this era was like it was like a whole other level in terms of songwriting, in terms of sound, in terms of the artwork, in terms of having just a cohesive package, because there's almost like it's probably the first time you guys have been political throughout the record as well. So it's just having like that kind of concept with it really cemented it in the Exhumed camp for me personally. Just as a fan, I was like, finally, this is like this is my record now. Like I still enjoy listening to it, to this day. But just walk me through how you specifically changed in terms of the songwriting to get the songs to where they kind of needed to be around, your career.
Well, the main thing was, really the in terms of just like building songs, nothing really changed too much. It's still just about, you got a verse, you got a chorus, you got a second verse, you got a chorus, you got some sort of bridge, you got a chorus at least at the end, and then maybe an intro and outro. And like, that's just how you write a song, whether it's Motown or punk or metal or gospel or pop or dance or whatever. That's how you write a fucking song. So none of that really changed. But the main thing was, when we were doing All Guts, or when we were on that tour, especially because we were on that tour cycle for so fucking long, I think we played every single song from that record live at some point. And that was the last time that happened. But as we were building the sets, and especially because we were doing some headlining tours, some support tours and stuff, and the pacing of the sets was off because every song was fast. And the sets ended up feeling more like endurance tests than sort of like an ebb and flow. Just like, a good record has an ebb and flow to it, and a live set has a kind of ebb and flow to it as well. And it was just, the audience, we noticed like whenever we would have like a slower section, the audience would really connect with it because it stood out so much. And it was like, oh, this is what this material is kind of missing, And then between All Guts and Necrocracy, I did the Death to All tour, and I was, playing like the Philosopher and stuff. And so seeing, playing that more kind of sophisticated mid-paced material and seeing how it connected with people, it just sort of maybe, and also realizing that some of those songs like Trapped in a Corner and the Philosopher and stuff, I was like, this is way easier than like an Exhumed song. And everyone's like, well, dude, that was amazing. I didn't know you could play that. And I was like, really? This is like, fuck, man. Try playing Disassembly Line at like 200 per minute, bro. So it just kind of opened my eyes a little bit as far as not having to feel like I was pushing myself to 100%, but still getting stuff that would connect with people at that level. And so every album, I just try to come in with a really simple kind of mantra. All Guts was just really like, what is Exhumed? And then Necrocracy was more groove. That was it. That was the entire direction of the album. It was just, I don't know, guys, more groove. And then the songs that we came up with. And, knowing that we had Bud allowed us to sort of write more precise harmonies and stuff like that, because, he just was a tighter guitar player, because the band is supposed to be structured. Every band I'm in, the way I try to structure it is that I'm like the fairly good guitar player that's mostly a singer that plays guitar. And then the other guy is the guitar player,
Even Dave Mustaine.
Exactly. And, or Chuck Schuldiner, James Murphy, Chuck Schuldiner, Paul Masvidal, Chuck Schuldiner, Bobby Coble, whatever. And so I'm just trying to occupy that space. And with Bud, I just knew, I was like, cool. I've got somebody that's never going to screw up live, that is going to memorize the songs instantaneously and play great stuff. So I have a little bit more space. And, working with Mike after touring for a year and a half, we had, I was like, I know how he plays, I know what he can do and how that can fit in to what we're doing. So it was a little bit more like a band situation, whereas All Guts was like, I wrote some songs, Wes wrote some songs, we demoed them, then we met up and just did it,
And now walk me through just getting the opportunity to play in Death 12, because you had mentioned it a little bit ago, and I kind of would like to touch on this, if you don't mind.
Like many things, I was not their first choice. Basically, the guys from Sick Drummer, just a quick background on the tour. The guys from Sick Drummer were putting together like a death tribute tour with all these members. And Eric Greif, who was Chuck's on-again, off-again manager and became the manager of his intellectual property estate.
He's his lawyer too, I think, right?
Yeah, right. But he's also Relapse's lawyer. Hence why Relapse ended up reissuing not just Death, but he also worked with Morbid Saint, and that's how that came about. Anyway, he was also promoting shows in Calgary, and we played Calgary, and I met Eric, and I was like, so are you the Eric Greif, like from Milwaukee, that used to manage Death and like Viogression and Morbid Saint and stuff and Numbskull? And he was like, yeah, actually. And so I got into this big conversation with him. And then I met him again in LA shortly before Death All was sort of coming together. It was like a Relapse showcase gig or something. And I was like, hey, I heard that this is happening. If you guys need a singer, because I thought they got 10 guitar players, like they don't need a fun guitar player. Like, if you guys need a singer, I mean, I know all the words to the first 3 albums by heart pretty much anyway, and I sing kind of in the same range. You know where to find me, whatever. And
you also kind of look, I mean, from afar away, you could kind of pass for, like you got the long brown hair,
my hair a little bit darker, and lose about 30 pounds, maybe, and I'll be good. But anyway, the Sick Drummer guys were kind of spearheading it, and they wanted Stefan from Obscura to do it. And they sort of were they divided the show up between 2 frontmen. They had Charles Elliott from Abysmal Dawn, who is a great vocalist and a great guitar player, but I was like, he doesn't sing anywhere near Chuck's register. But he killed it, but it just didn't sound like Death because of his vocals. And I actually loved Charles's leads, and I thought he really brought something cool to the table on that tour. And I love Charles as a guy. And then they were going to have Stefan do the later material. And so they called me in because Stefan's visa wasn't going through, and it was looking like he was not going to make his flight. And this is the first tour that these guys, I think the last tour that they ever put together. And I was like, this is your first tour, and you're doing a gig with like fucking 18 band members, 2 guitar techs, and a photographer, and 2 buses. I was like, this is a nightmare. But whatever, I wasn't doing anything anyway, so I might as well like spend the next, week and a half trying to learn these songs. And so I came up and started playing with the guys, and it was a great situation for me. It was a little scary, and because I was generally the worst musician in the room at any given moment, but it was great because I had a lot to learn, and I was bringing something a little different to the table than all these other guys. I was an underground death metal guy. The guys that played on Sound of Perseverance, I mean, they wouldn't know Hellhammer from Black Flag, but they could probably tell you everything about King Crimson, which I don't know shit about. So, I was bringing something a little bit different to the table, and it ended up being really fun. And getting to jam with like Steve DiGiorgio and Gene Hogan, and for me, that was like a fucking dream come true. Even if I wasn't playing like my favorite death songs, but just seeing how much the audience connected with them, that was really powerful. Anyway, the tour lost a ton of money because it was the first tour they ever put together. They started this idea, but they didn't even have the rights to the fucking name, So there was like the Sick Drummer guys, and then Eric, who's kind of coming in at the end to be like, whoa, this is not how we're going to do it. But the shows did really good. Like we played House of Blues, Chicago, and it was fucking packed. That's a big room. And anyway, obviously Death to All now has morphed into something else, and it's continuing to this day, and in a much more sensible, streamlined fashion. Right. And Gene and Bobby and Steve and Max have done a great job with it. Anyway, for me, I was just like, well, this is a fun vacation. They said I was going to get paid. I didn't get paid, but whatever.
Well, that's what the whole thing was with that whole tour. Like nobody got paid, right? If my understanding,
they lost their ass on it. They didn't understand the deals they were signing, and they were mad at the agent. And I was, who was also Exhumed's agent at the time. And I was like, no, I know this guy. I just toured for 2 fucking years with this guy as our agent. Like, he's not full of shit. You just don't know what you're signing. You're just like getting something in front of you and just doing whatever. You don't understand how this side of the business works. And so it was just a really weird vibe because there were so many people and everybody had been promised various things. And towards the end, it was becoming clear that wasn't going to happen, which was very low pressure for me because I would have liked to have gotten paid, but at the end of the day, I wasn't planning on it. I wasn't depending on it. I was never in death. So for me, I was like, this is a pretty cool way to spend 2 weeks. I'm rolling around on a fucking bus, like doing blow with fucking Sean Reiner. Like, this is a great way to spend 2 weeks, picking his brain and just like talking shit about the Heat and, the basketball team. And it was just, I had a great fucking time. So whatever. But that did, that I guess that becomes more important later on when Gruesome gets started. Correct. Because that was sort of an outgrowth of that,
Right. Well, and in my personal opinion, Sean Reiner is probably my favorite drummer, probably in death metal period, even though he's only been on like, 4 or 5 records at this point now.
Right.
But 2 of them literally changed the game with Focus and Human.
He's an amazing drummer, or he was an amazing drummer, which is really fucking sad to think about. Yeah. And out of everybody that I met, everybody was cool. Like, nobody was a dick at all. But out of everybody I met that had been in death, he and I just struck up a friendship like right away, and we just had a blast. Like, I loved hanging out with that dude. And anyway, obviously he's no longer with us, and that's
terrible.
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks for the entire metal scene and music scene, and it's kind of mind blowing to contemplate. But I just have so many fond memories. And then later on, during I think it was the Necrocracy tour cycle, we did a couple of shows with Death to All, and it was just like such a blast, like getting to hang out with them again, and I saw him only a couple more times after that, and I would never have occurred to me in a million years that those would be the last times I would see him. It's crazy,
right? I got a chance to hang with him and smoke a joint with Steve backstage, and dude, it was fucking awesome. He couldn't have been nicer. Even if, me being the scared little twerp, as I'll call myself, I'm like, hey, can I get a picture? He's like, yeah, man, no problem. And he was like super nice. He was like, took the time to do that.
Right.
I didn't have to pay for a meet and greet or anything like that. Because
Sean wasn't about any of that stuff. He's just about the music.
And that's where I was going with it. He just was super down to earth and was he just loved to play music. And I think this was like one of the last times he played with Death to All, because of his knee injury.
Right.
So yeah, but I got to see him drum too, and that was fucking like mind blowing to watch that guy play. Yeah, whole other level for me. But huge rest in peace. That's why we kind of dedicated, a Violent End to Life. We did a little nod to Flattening of Emotions, because that's our favorite Death record. So just a shame, man.
It really is, man. It's super sad. But yeah, it was a great experience for me, and it was fun, and I didn't take it too seriously, and that ended up working out well for me. They approached me about doing the next tour, but we were getting busy with Exhumed, and I was like, I had a little bit more faith because it was Eric approached me directly, and he's like, we've done this, we've made these changes. Going forward, it's going to be like this. Do you want to do it? Like, you're going to get paid. I mean, I'm Relapse lawyer. You know where to find. You know where to find me. And I was like, I would, but Exhumed's going out with Suffocation, so I'm not gonna. This is my main priority, and I don't know how long Death to All is going to last or whatever, and I'm not going to like shunt Exhumed aside for a tribute band. No matter. I was just thinking, like, dude, if I could tell myself when I was 13, like, yeah, you're going to just pass on going to play with, like, Steve DiGiorgio and Gene Hoglan, just the guy that played on Darkness Descends, like, I would have, like, murdered myself at 13. Like, what, dude? You're a fucking idiot. But, it was more important to me just to focus on Exhumed, where obviously I have a bigger stake in things, I have more control, and I also didn't want to like ditch those guys and be like, all right, cool, I got a better gig. Like, fuck y'all,
Right, and you don't know how long it's going to last, right? But but you got to play with them essentially too. So it's like,
right,
you got to, and they were going through a lot of legal issues during that moment where they literally changed the name and due to rights issues and whatever else. So, but a great thing came out of it, like you said. Gruesome grew into something probably bigger than you had expected.
Definitely.
But I'm just, what was your initial concept to wanting to start a project such as this? Because Exhumed, it was kind of like what Carcass was developing into, but now you wanted to do like a band that Death had already had kind of like, I don't know, paved the way for.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tribute band. Gruesome is a tribute band. It's, let's just call it what it is. And we made no bones about it. I mean, really, how it happened was when we were out with Suffocation went to Canada. We all have DUIs, so we can't go to Canada. They stopped letting us in. And we'd lost a ton of money actually on that Municipal Waste Napalm Death tour. Between the engine in our van dying and not being able to go to Canada, we lost like 10 or like 14 grand or something. It was insane. Anyway, so we just were like, do not book us in Canada. We're not going. And we had these 2 pickup dates with Death to All. And that's where I met Gus Rios, who had played in Malevolent Creation on and off, and, a bunch of lesser known Florida bands. But he was like, he and Sean were super tight buddies. Sean was his old drum instructor. He was there teching for Sean. And he's, I think he just really took the teching gig because he just wanted to see Sean play Death songs every night. And anyway, we were just backstage shooting the shit with everybody. And Gus had played Baptized in Blood with Death to All. He was doing just a sit-in every night, and he was playing a way faster tempo than everybody else. And I was like, man, I got to tell you, like, it was great to hear that song like played really fast because Sean is such a laid back pocket player that the tempos end up getting dragged down sometimes. And he and I were just laughing because he had gone to the Orlando Death gig, I think, or maybe he'd seen footage or heard about it, whatever. And he was like, you and I should get James Murphy and Terry Butler, and we can just do like, franchise this shit, and we'll just do like a club tour where we just play stuff from the first 3 albums. I'm like, man, that would be so fucking fun. And then I just jokingly said in an offhand remark, and if that doesn't come together, I'll just write some Death songs and we'll just make our own band. And we laughed and had a beer, and then that was it. And, I think we exchanged information or whatever. And then I was dating my wife, or I just started dating my wife at the time. She's British, so I was spending a lot of time in England in between tours. And so I was in England, and she was either, she was just before she graduated college. So she was either at school or she was at the bar where she was working. And she had a beat up old Jackson at her house. So I picked up the guitar and I was like, oh, maybe I'll write a funny death song, like I said. And I was just screwing around for a couple hours, and I came up with what ended up being Gangrene from Savage Land. And I just, I tabbed it out in Guitar Pro on my laptop that I had with me. And I sent it to Gus, and I was like, this would be funny, right? And he recorded real drums for it. He's like, this is actually pretty good. And then he got Dan Gonzalez to track the guitars, and he sent me a demo with live guitars and drums. And I was like, this actually sounds pretty fucking good. Like, I'm like really surprised that this is pretty good. And so then I wrote Savage Land before I came back to the States, and we started talking about it. And he's like, yeah, well, what do you think about Robin Mason on bass? And I was like, I love Robin. Like, she's a good friend of mine. That's great. And so he put the band together, and they recorded all the instruments for the demo and just sent me the tracks, and I recorded the vocals here in town. And I was like, I sent it to Relapse, like, hey, we're going to put this up on Bandcamp. I don't know if you guys would be interested. They're like, how many songs are you putting up? I was like, well, we got 4. They're like, just put up 2. Here's a record contract. And I was like, okay, done. That was it,
What kind of record contract was it? Album by album basis, 3-album deal, 4-album deal?
It was a 3-album deal. And it was sort of weird because we ended up doing 2 records and then 2 EPs. And now we're going to be working on the 3rd record finally. So it got a little fudged there. But I was like really, it was really easy, really natural thing. I was like, okay. And it came out, and I was boggled at how much people seemed to like the record. I thought it was just kind of like a novelty album. We really worked hard on it, and I tried to make the songs as good as possible. I really actually worked really hard on it. But I thought it was just going to be like a thing that like a few people would really like it. A slightly smaller amount of people would really hate it, and then nobody else would ever talk about it again. And that ended up not being the case.
And I think the reason for that is because Death to All was such a massive it was, maybe one didn't draw as well, but dude, everybody was talking about it because people were still hungry for Death, the band or whatever, because the band had, hadn't been around for fucking 15 years or whatever.
And the death metal was obviously in the resurging stages,
Of course, but it was just right place, right time, sort of thing.
Right.
But you also too, what I loved about it is, well, not just because the riffs were they reminded me of certain songs, because that's why I loved it, because it reminded me of this song and this song. Oh, there's that riff from this thing that kind of sounds like this, but you added this tail from this song onto this riff.
Right.
So, but that's what I loved about it. But you also brought in people that worked with Death initially, you brought in Repka to do the cover.
Right.
You said, hey, this album is reminiscent of leprosy. Give us something that is like a disease sort of thing.
Right. I was just like, hey, as long as it sort of looks like leprosy, but the title track is about cannibals, like cannibal ferox or whatever, cannibal Holocaust type shit. Just come back with something. And it was like, oh, this is perfect. And we had James Murphy play a couple solos on the record. And, one of the reasons why it's just great because James was one of my heroes growing up, but we wanted to have somebody that was involved with Death on the record so that people knew that we kind of had the seal of approval of the guys, and with Eric being Relapse's lawyer, he was aware of the project from pretty much the beginning. And, he was like, oh yeah, have fun with it. Like, go wild. And so we wanted to, it's really weird because it's a death metal band, but we wanted to make sure people knew it was done in a very respectful spirit. It was about honoring the legacy of Chuck and everybody that had worked on those records and celebrating that, not trying to make a quick buck by cashing in on something that was already successful. For me, I was like, look, I already have a working band. I'm not doing this. Obviously, it's not like Exhumed makes a fucking boatload of money. I have a day job too, but at the same time, it's not like I'm dying to like make a fucking $800 guarantee to play a fucking show. Like that's not my be all end all goal. I'm doing this because I love death. I did the Death to All tour because I love death. And I didn't really get to do the era that I loved the most and kind of put my stamp on it. So whatever, this is my way of making my own way to do that. And, I know the guys, or a lot of the guys that used to play in death, and they're all cool with it. Terry Butler's cool with it. James Murphy's cool with it. Their manager's cool with it. So I feel good about it. And if you don't like it, killer. That's great. But a lot of people seem to like it, which is even better,
Absolutely. I think it's fucking awesome. I think it's just, it's needed. Is all.
I was really surprised that it was, but I guess it was.
Here's where I'm going with this. You have a lot of bands that kind of were trying to be or sound like death, especially in Southern California.
Right.
And unfairly so, we got lumped into that as well. But I'm saying, like, there are bands that try to do it, to emulate it to like a T, but I don't think people got it. I don't think people were successful at doing it until you guys did it. You know what I mean? You kind of showed everybody how to do that if you wanted to. And then once you did it, nobody else wanted to do it because you had done it so greatly that nobody could compete with it,
Well,
that's just my take.
Chuck has a really distinct writing style. And there's a through line from, even the demos all the way through Sound of Perseverance. He does certain riff shapes. He modulates in certain ways that, we're kind of consistent, I mean, that was the thing that I learned when I was, learning the songs for Death to All. I was like, really the grounding that I had from learning the songs on leprosy and spiritual healing when I was 13 was still very applicable to learning, A Thousand Eyes or Trapped in a Corner or even Symbolic and stuff. And I was like, that really kind of surprised me. And, I was very fortunate to have a lot of formative guitar playing experiences playing death songs. And then later on as a professional, gain more experience by playing death songs with the guys in Death. So I felt like, having gotten those records when Death was an active band and having seen Death live, and I had kind of an advantage maybe that some of the younger bands that were emulating Death didn't. And I also think that having the balls to just be like, here's our logo, it looks like the Death logo. Here's our album cover, it looks like a Death album cover, and it's drawn by the guy that did the Death album covers. Like, we really we're just like, yo, boom, here it is. And yeah, of course, like, we know we're a Death clone band. We're trying to be a Death clone band. And so that kind of takes the air out of the criticism. Like, these guys are just a Death clone band. Yes, we are.
That's the point of it.
Point. If you want to hear my own take on death metal, go buy an Exhumed record. I'm just here like being like, I love Chuck. You love Chuck. If you like what I'm doing, let's party. If you don't like what I'm doing, fucking go see Death to All and listen to Death records. And
absolutely,
hey, man, good on you.
Well, so far in the catalog, which we got to get to Expulsion to end this specific part. Savage Land, Leprosy, Dimensions of Horror, Scream Bloody Gore.
Right.
Arguably, probably my favorite.
Mine too.
Besides the Fragments of Psyche, which is Human.
Right.
But and then oh my gosh, I don't have it. You have Twisted Prayers, which is spiritual healing, right? So I'm hoping for more of the Fragments of Psyche kind of stuff because
that's the plan.
Because Human is still that Scream Bloody Gore are my two favorite death records ever.
That makes so much sense. Listening to Madras, that makes all the sense in the world.
Well, there you go. I just spoiled it for you. But yeah, dude, those are my favorites. So, but you got obviously Sean to do Fragments of Psyche. So,
right,
which is fucking awesome because you got the real guy to actually play how he would do that song around that time.
Right.
So I think it was just it's very I can't think of the word right now, but you know what I'm saying. It's very truthful to what Death was.
Right. I mean, and you know, Sean doing the song was so cool for me as a fan. You know, thankfully, it's like, you know, I knew Sean, like we were friends, but we weren't like super tight bros for years like him and Gus were. And you know, I think Sean had just left Cynic, and he was just kind of wanted to do something that was fun and low pressure, just to let people know he was still a going concern, kind of thing. And you know, Gus is he's very much the Lars Ulrich of Gruesome. Like he's the first guy to be like, we're awesome. Like he's gonna like sell you the band. And whereas I wouldn't have had the balls to just be like, well, why don't you play one of our tracks, Sean? And he was just like, yeah, fuck it, dude, play on one of our tracks. And he's like, we need a human type song. And I was like, well, I have some riffs. And so I fleshed out the song, and Sean, you know, came in and did a great job. And I loved what he came up with. It was so, some of it was like, you know, kind of what I expected. And some of it was like, what the fuck is that? Like, holy shit.
Authentic is the word I was looking for. Authentic.
There you go. Authentic. Yes.
God damn it. Anyway, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah, it was very authentic to what it was, and you got the real guy to do it. So it was, I mean, come on, you can't ask for more than that, dude.
Dude,
Lastly on this episode, which, dude, I hopefully you'll give me another opportunity to do part 4, because this is, you know,
now, it's a good time, man.
Now, let's talk about Expulsion and just the formation of it, because you know it's another almost a Repulsion type tribute, right? Like you've only made the one album EP so far, which hopefully there'll be more soon. I'm hoping so, because that fucking record ruled. But just walk me through the formation of, you know, talking with Matt and saying and just, you know, you want to do something.
Well, with Expulsion, really, you know, it goes back to when I was playing with Repulsion, because Matt wanted to do more, Scott didn't want to do more, and that was always the sort of tension between them.
Right.
You know, Scott had played in Cathedral, and he was doing Death Breath, and he was like, I'm satisfied, and it's better to just leave it alone. And Matt was just really doing just Repulsion, and he was like, well, I haven't got to do all these things that you've gotten to do, and yet we could be doing it with Repulsion. And so, you know, I think what he was writing was for a new Repulsion album. And at times he was, you know, talking about, when he first pitched the band to me, he was like, okay, it's going to be our band. Like, you know, you can play guitar and sing, and I'll play guitar and sing, and I want you to write a bunch of songs, and so on and so forth. And then Matt works at a very slow pace, you know, which is why however many years, 30 years after Horrified or whatever, there's just the one EP. And so I just sort of realized pretty quickly that I was just going to let him drive the car, steer the ship, whatever, and just kind of be ready when the time came. And in fact, the vocals that are on the album were the vocals I did for the pre-production. And, you know, so as I was busy with Exhumed, Matt was sort of slowly, he was putting the band together with Menno and with Danny. And, you know, he was putting the record deal together, which I didn't really have anything to do with. And I didn't really even know what was happening, because Matt had changed his phone number at some point, or he got a new phone, whatever. It wasn't like it wasn't a sneaky thing. He just happened to get a new phone number. And I had both his numbers in my contacts, but for some reason I kept using the old one, and I was mixed up. I thought the old one was a new one. And I had texted him a few times, and I was like, I haven't heard from this dude in like 6 months. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Because, you know, I sort of heard some rumblings, and then Joel from Toxic was mastering the EP. And he texted me, he's like, oh, this EP is great, man. And I was like, what EP? And because I was waiting to like figure out when I was going to do the vocals. I was supposed to get in touch with Matt and be like, I'll do the vocals at X time. And I thought I was trying to get in touch with him, but I was using the wrong phone number. Anyway, and so at some point, Matt had made the decision, I don't know, independently of certainly myself, I don't know about the other guys, to just do the songs that he had written and had demoed, and then we demoed as an EP. And that was going to be the introduction to the band. And then work on a full length going forward. And anyway, I didn't really know about any of this until it was in motion. And I finally, like, somebody, a mutual friend or somebody gave me his number, or I emailed him, and he had a couple different emails through the years I've known him. Anyway, so I finally somehow got in touch with him, and I was like, what the fuck, dude? Like, what's going on? And he called me immediately, and he's like, dude, are you okay? Like, because I was, I wrote him kind of a pissed off email. It wasn't like, fuck you, but it was just like, I have no clue what the fuck's happening. And he's like, yeah, I kept waiting for you to get a hold of me, and you didn't. So I just moved forward with what we had. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. I do have your new phone number. I didn't realize this was a new one. So we had, we talked and we figured it out or whatever. And anyway, and so then the record came out, and I really liked the record. I thought it was great. And, again, I was just like, well, I'll just wait for Matt. Like, he's going to be, I wrote the lyrics and the titles and stuff, and all the music was his. And the songs were great. There was no, I had no qualms with any of it. The songs that I had written, I ended up using later, adapting them for the last Exhumed record. But again, getting ahead of myself. And so I just was like, well, we'll see what happens with this. And, just knowing how Matt works, which is very slowly and very meticulously with a lot of overthinking, I just kind of was like, I'll just let it, whatever happens is cool. I'm not going to put too much stock in this, but people seem to really like the record. We got really good reviews. I thought it was really good. It's easier for me to be objective about because it's Matt's songs. And I mean, he co-wrote my favorite death metal album of all time. So I'm sort of like predisposed to thinking it's quite good. But, it just sort of went on for a while with not much happening. And then I think we did 2 shows. We did a fest in LA, and then we did a fest in Denver. And it's really fun to just be in a band where, well, it went from I was going to be the guitar player, singer. Then he was like, well, I want you to play bass and sing. And then it was like, well, I want you to just be the singer. And so I was kind of getting the message. It was like, the original pitch was it's going to be our band together. And I was like, okay, so this is Matt's thing. And I'm just going to be the guy that helps with what I'm helping with. And again, because I have my own bands, I wasn't like going to like fight for control. I was like, if that's what you want, that's what I'll do. And it's really fun to just play a show where all I have to do is like sing. It's like really like, it's quite cool.
Absolutely.
And then he wanted to do this gig in San Diego or something. And it just seemed like whatever he would pitch, I was like, I can't, and that happened like 3 or 4 times. And at a certain point, he had sent me an email like talking about something that he wanted to do. And he was just sort of giving me the out, because he wasn't being like, I don't want to work with you. He was just like, well, I don't know how this is how are we going to handle this if this keeps occurring. The obvious solution was for me to say, you know what, I'm just going to step aside. I love the record we did. Best of luck to you guys. I love all you guys. Get somebody that can be there when you need, because I can't plan, a full-time working band around the 2 or 3 shows that you're going to sort of decide to do on a whim. Like, I just can't do that. And, then that was it. And I know Fred from Dismember was going to work with them on vocals. And I heard some of the songs, like Matt had sent me like 3 or 4 songs that he was working on. This is a few years ago now. I mean, this is all old shit from back now. And they were really good. I don't know what's going to become of them or what. But so, yeah, hopefully there will be more. Who knows?
Who knows? Well, Matt, dude, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity once again.
Pleasure,
hopefully part 4 in the near future, huh? Hopefully.
Yeah, I think we should be current at that point. We're getting close.
Yeah, exactly. But another episode of Puppets Corner. I'm out of here, guys. Cheers.